My girlfriend, whom I will now call Priya, and I have been dating for 3 years. It began innocently enough when I left a comment on one of her Instagram posts, and we began conversing. After a week, I ultimately got her phone and Snapchat. We first met in person in January, just after the holidays, and Valentine's Day was rapidly approaching. It was pleasant to start a conversation with a female at that time, so that I wouldn't have to deal with the fear of being alone on that annoying holiday. But as Valentine's Day drew near and Priya and I were on a few dates, she confided in me about a stalker situation she had been dealing with. The man's name is Ben, and he's a few years older than Priya. He happened to attend the same commuter college as her, met her in class for a group project, and followed her around campus a few times. She never called the police or anything, but when I learned that this guy had discovered her residence, he sent her a series of spooky texts. She said she never blocked the number because she wanted to see how far he would go without the hint. She brought this to my attention by saying that he started texting her more frequently, especially for Valentine's Day, as you can see here. As the day drew near, she continued to ignore the texts and let them pile up. But he took it to the next level. It was from him because he texted her, "I hope you like the gift I left you." At this point, she decided to end the relationship and replied to him in a lengthy message that I won't share for her privacy. In short, she said that he needed help and that she was seeing someone else, so she wanted to leave him alone. However, a few days later, Priya sent me a worrying screenshot of a text from a phony number asking if the guy she was seeing was me, as he wrote my name. I became involved, which made me feel somewhat uneasy. Up until now, all I've heard about this guy was that he was an extremely creepy and persistent texter who might have followed the girl I'm seeing home to her house. I told Priya that if this didn't stop, I would go with her to the police station since she was preparing to call the police. If you reach out again, fast forward to Valentine's Day. On a Friday this year, Priya and I went out to eat at a nice restaurant that was on the water. We sat at an outside table because the weather was nice, and as we ate, we noticed a guy sitting on a bench outside the dining area by the parking lot with a hat conspicuously pulled down his face as if he were hiding. Priya made a joke about how we might be looking at him, but he tilted his head slightly in our direction as we were looking at him. A few minutes later, he got up and left, and we stopped laughing. After a few minutes, the conversation turned to something else, and we enjoyed the rest of our time there, but her parents were home, so I had the place to myself. We walked back to my rental house together, and as we were sitting on the couch, things started to get a little more intimate. Priya pulled away from me and said, "What was that?" I thought I heard something outside in the backyard, and she nodded her head. I went outside to the patio, expecting to hear an animal scurrying away in response to my presence. I slipped on my slides and walked around the yard, searching for anything that might have fallen over, and I discovered that the entire stack of beach chairs that were leaning on the house had been knocked over. I'm not sure how that would have happened, unless someone or something bumped into them, because there wasn't even the slightest breeze that night. I looked around at the bushes that surrounded our yard, and then, as if my brain could have detected something out of place right away, I stepped forward a few steps after locking my eyes on something tall in the bushes, my neck protruding forward as I literally tried to focus and get a better look at what I was looking at. I had an epiphany when I realized it was someone standing in the bushes, and he had noticed me by this time. I said, "Who is that?" And the man began to emerge from the bushes so swiftly that I took it as a threat, as if he were going to charge at me, so I took advantage of the opportunity to get him down. I repeatedly yelled at him to stay down while he was still struggling with the bushes and twigs. When Priya came outside, I called her name and told her to call the police. The man on the ground struggled and made several attempts to break free, but I was able to keep him in a steady hold until she spoke to the police. She gasped when I inquired whether this was the person who had been bothering her, and she answered, "Oh my God, yes, it was the Ben guy." What's worse is that just now, when Priya showed the officers all of the harassing and obsessive messages she had been receiving from him since he was already being arrested, I realized he was wearing the same color shirt that the man with the cap from earlier at the restaurant was wearing. The police arrived at the house, put him in cuffs, and charged him with trespassing and taking advantage of the situation. The man finally paid a fee and received a misdemeanor after Priya filed accusations of stalking and harassment against him. She also obtained an order of protection against him, and he will now be arrested if he ever gets in touch with her again. Ben was the ultimate creep. Thank God he's at least half as smart as to not have gotten in touch with her again. But this happened 4 years ago. As we were entering the restaurant, a couple outside was strangely staring at my boyfriend, so I shoved his arm a little as we entered, and he gave his name to be put in the wait line. The host said there would be a 45-minute wait, and that she would text us when our table was ready. My boyfriend said we should go to the mini-golf across the street, so we were walking back to his car when the woman from the couple stood up and introduced herself as Mrs. Greedy. I thought this was really strange and looked at my boyfriend, but she was still holding out her hand. I shook her. The woman continued by explaining that she and her husband think we're a very attractive couple and that they're photographers. They think we'd make great photos, so they think we should follow them to the studio because she thinks the wait time will be long. She adds that she doesn't have a card on her, but that their place is 5 minutes away, and they could take us there as well. Red flags are going off, and my boyfriend politely declines and lets her know we have things to do. The look was still one of the most ever as she smiled and sat down next to the husband. As we get into the car, I tell my boyfriend how creepy that exchange was and how the husband didn't even say anything. We enter the mini-golf place and are quite surprised to find it empty. We laugh. As we're on our 5th round, I hear the entrance bell ring and turn to look, and my heart sinks. It's the same lady with her husband. She seems to look around, and then, as we make eye contact, she gives me the creepiest smile. The situation is off, but in reality, I'm still creeped out because this place isn't really huge, and you can see the front door on all the levels. My boyfriend turns to look as they're getting their things after I tell him that I'm uncomfortable, and that we should just wait in the car since it's only been 15 minutes, and won't be much longer. He agrees, and we turn around to find them directly behind us, giving us the widest, crazy smiles. How did we both get up here, Mrs. Greedy, this time? The spouse believes we should go up against Rod and each other. The fact that my boyfriend's last name is Rod's made his heart sink. We politely declined, not wanting to know how they found out, and said we had to leave. As we hurried out of there, I told my boyfriend that since his place was closer than mine and my parents wouldn't be home, we should just call it a night and head back there. When he got a text from the dining establishment saying they were ready for us, we ate dinner and he insisted that I pay today since it's Valentine's Day. We usually split the bill, so he went to the bathroom, and while I waited, I thought I saw that woman peeking out from around a corner. He said that we would go after a meal and not let some randomly weird couple ruin the night for us. I persuaded myself that my lover getting out and getting ready to go was all in my imagination. You have to drive down this long, tree-lined road to get to his property. As we get started, we see a vehicle driving behind us. I tell my husband, and we enter a CVS parking lot. I need to use the potty, so since it was going to be a drive, we both get out and leave. You cannot see the car that might have been following us anywhere, so we head to his house. You know the road I mentioned earlier, the one with the trees? Well, we were about 3 or 5 minutes into it when we heard a loud pop, and my boyfriend stopped his car. He realized that his 2 front tires had popped, so he hurried to the car and told them to get out because they wouldn't have a lot of time before they arrived. He then cut his engine, turned off the lights, and locked the door. I told him that we should wait in the car, and he quickly got me. We ran into the woods, and he told me to keep quiet. While we were hiding behind some trees and bushes, he called the police and quickly explained where we were and what was happening. As we lay down, we heard a car's engine coming up. My boyfriend told me to lay flat, and he did the same. We heard the familiar voice of Mrs. Greedy, if that was her real name, yelling, "We took too long." We stayed down until the police arrived, which was about 2 minutes later. We explained the situation, and we were told that we would be contacted if something came up. I called my sister to come get us, and he called the tow truck for his car. In the autumn of 2018, I was enrolled in some online courses at a highly prominent institution, but I was aware that I would spend the winter semester at a university in my hometown for a year. However, in order to avoid feeling alone, I still wanted to make some new acquaintances. I also thought it could be wonderful to find someone to date along the road, which is exactly what occurred. Nothing has surfaced on it in 4 years, and we never learned who they were or what they wanted. We have a wacky narrative to share with our children now that we are married. To put it briefly, I met this lady on Tinder, and she was extremely lovely. We had a lot in common. She wasn't from my area, and I had observed that once she returned from her Thanksgiving break, we began dating and had a great time together. She used to be more sarcastic, but now she simply appeared cruel. For instance, the light-hearted focus teasing had become much more aggressive, even if there was no physical injury. I should clarify that it was just the kind of teasing that is inappropriate in a romantic setting. I dismissed it as stress brought on by the impending finals. The winter semester began. We constantly found methods to remain in contact, including texting, snapping, and FaceTime once or twice a week, even after she ultimately returned home for winter break. On the night of the first day of school, I discovered a wonderful apartment that was unexpectedly affordable, so I moved out of the dormitories since they didn't seem like much fun. She was from a different state, and as I mentioned, she was having a lot of problems being away from home. She missed her family, friends, and pets a lot, aside from me and her roommate, with whom she didn't really get along. She was just a shy person, which isn't a bad thing, but as I mentioned, she didn't have many friends to surround herself with, so she just wanted to be by herself all the time. It was a nice way to end the relationship without having to do the dumping, as I get too stressed and anxious about such things. I felt a bit less depressed every day for a few weeks as I reflected about the connection. It was the week before Valentine's Day, and I was a little depressed since I had some exciting plans to surprise my girlfriend with, so I thought maybe for that week. There were a lot of things that I had forgotten. To see if I might find a match and maybe spend the vacation with someone, I would really renew my Tinder account. Since the most of my pals had their own boyfriends and girlfriends, so I wouldn't be alone. About 2 days before to the holiday, I completed the task and received several matches. After using the app for a few hours, I talked with the majority of them and inquired about their Valentine's Day plans, which surprised me. They were all going out to bars, which I personally don't enjoy. I always use it as a last resort, so I wasn't that desperate. But eventually I started texting a girl named Alex, who wasn't into that. She preferred to stay in and watch movies, which is what I would prefer to do as well. She even had the same major as one of my best friends and was enrolled in some of the same classes as him, but she wasn't sure if they had classes at the same time because they had just begun, and she was trying to figure out everyone's names. The best way to describe Alex is that she had shoulder-length blonde hair, cute glasses, freckles, and bright blue eyes. After an hour or so of texting, I got her Snapchat and we continued our conversation. I asked her if she would like to hang out on Valentine's Day, which was on a Thursday of the week. Fortunately, I didn't have any classes on Friday, so Alex said she would skip her class so we wouldn't feel pressured to end the night so early. The first part of the night went fairly smoothly. We got some McDonald's, watched a movie, and then took a stroll around downtown. To be honest, everything went really well, and she asked if she could spend the night because it was snowing and her place was about 10 minutes away. Of course, I told her she could stay, and we eventually fell asleep at 1 a.m. I tend to sleep lightly, particularly when there is another person in bed with me at 3 in the morning. Alex woke me up as she was getting out of bed, but I didn't tell her that she had done so. It was dark in the room, but I could see that she was heading to the bathroom. She turned on the light and closed the door to prevent it from spilling into the bedroom. I was so exhausted that I just went back to sleep, but when I woke up again at 5:30 a.m., I was surprised to see that Alex wasn't in the bed next to me. I turned to see if she was still in the bathroom, but I couldn't see the outline of the light, so I assumed it was off. I wasn't particularly shocked yet. I was just wondering where she was, so I sat up and took my phone off my bedside table. I didn't have any texts from her indicating that she had left, but I could see that the clothes she had been wearing earlier were still on the floor next to mine, so she was still here somewhere. Alex was standing in the corner of the bedroom, back to me, when I heard a creeping sound from the other side. I was so frightened that I called out her name and asked her if she was okay, but she didn't respond. I turned on the lamp I had on my bedside table, which didn't produce much light, but it was enough. I got out of bed and walked over to her, but she was just standing there, not even moving. I wanted to see what was going on, so I put a gentle hand on her shoulder and said her name again. But there was 10 seconds of silence, and just as I was about to say it again, she turned around at an unnaturally fast pace and began screaming and hitting me. It wasn't the hardest blow, but it hurt a little, and the scariest thing was that she had no emotion on her face at all. After about 30 seconds of this, she ran to get her clothes, grabbed them, and fled my apartment. She was gone when I sprang out of bed and hurried to my front door, which was ajar. After locking it and closing it, I discovered that the bathroom was smelling awful. When I opened the door after it had been closed, a foul odor emerged. The room was in disarray when I switched on the light. The shower curtain had been torn off, my medication bag had been dropped to the floor, and my floor was wet. To make matters worse, she had soiled the mirror with her feces. As soon as I contacted the police, an officer arrived at my house. They requested access to her Tinder and Snapchat profiles, but both had obviously been deleted. I only had one photo of her that she sent on Snapchat, which I had taken a screenshot of because it was adorable, but she was using a Snapchat filter. Regretfully, the police could only file a report and keep an eye out for her in the area. They suggested that I invite a friend over for a sleepover later that night in case she tried to break in, so I did. I called one of my closest friends, Rob. Later that evening, he came over and I told him the whole tale since he shared Alex's major. She mentioned attending a somewhat tiny class that only met twice a week, which my buddy was also enrolled in. When I asked Rob whether he knew her after showing him my photo, he said that he had never seen her in class. Rob and I watched a movie and went to bed at about 1 in the morning. When I woke up at 4 in the morning, I saw someone attempting to open the front door from the other side. After letting it run for a minute or two, it stopped, so I went to check via the peephole, but no one was there. Nothing has occurred since, but I still get very scared about it.